I invite everyone to take seats for the next panel on storage, to which everyone wants to give money, according to the billionaire who asked a question on the first panel. Where is that billionaire? Yeah. So I think it's really worth listening to the business case, which are potentially or actually available experience from the real market players and from transmission system operator from Ukrenergo. I think it will be a very interesting panel. I'm also looking forward to hear some interesting views myself. So yeah, I think we can start. We have today, as I said, extremely interesting panel of the people who, despite the war, are already doing some incredible things in Ukraine. And we have representative from Ukrenergo who is also beyond imagination, doing a lot of nice things. And honestly, once Ukrenergo announced the auctions for the storage last summer, I thought it's impossible. And then I thought it's impossible to build anything within the timeline which was suggested. And we were also, as Scatec, looking at the auctions, and we thought that we will not be able to build so quickly. But here we have on the panel representatives from DTEK, who managed to build 200 megawatts in Ukraine during the war in such a short timeline, together with Fluence, and it's incredibly interesting to hear their perspective and lessons learned. And we have also IFC, who is also super supportive in Ukraine, and I'm really grateful for whatever you do, and I will be very curious to hear your feelings and experience. So first of all, I would like to give floor to Ruslana, and you have amazing presentation. Thank you for the first presentation from Alina on the first panel, and Ruslana, I saw yours. I'm sure people will take photos right now as well.
Yes, I hope my presentation would be not less great as my colleague's one. So let's start. And today I will present a topic that is becoming increasingly critical for Ukrainian energy sector. The development of energy storages market in Ukraine is a key tool for the enhancing the flexibility and reliability of our power system. The growth of solar and wind power plants with non-guaranteed generation schedules has increased the need for balancing capacities. This leads to greater market volatility and creates strong incentives for energy storages development. According to Ukrenergo's target scenario, energy storages capacities is expected to reach 1.65 gigawatts by 2034. Ukraine has introduced several legislative and financial incentives for energy storages development. For example, energy storages activities are allowed without license for several categories of consumers and producers. Special auctions for ancillary services have been launched. Access to low-cost financing from international financial institutions, VAT exemptions on energy storages equipment imports until the end of 2025, accelerated depreciation as well. Something goes wrong. Oh, yeah. The integrated power system of Ukraine requires reinforcement due to its heavy reliance on nuclear generation, growing share of renewables, and the loss of most load-following thermal plants. That's why energy storages plays a vital role in increasing system flexibility, reliability, and stability. Facilitating RES integration, optimizing daily production and consumption schedule, and supporting cross-border flows and NCE balancing obligations. Our reserve needs for the next 10 years include 1.2 gigawatt of upward and 0.45 gigawatt of downward regulation. The competitive model of the electricity market opens up wide opportunities for the application of energy storages and allows them to operate across all market segments. Energy storages can maintain power system stability in ancillary services market, can provide balancing services in balancing market. They can practice arbitrage on day-ahead market or intraday markets. They can ensure reliability of supply for institutions, enterprises, organizations, households. They can minimize own imbalances, for example, for us, optimize electricity supply profile. It was already said that Ukrenergo has launched special auctions, and we had 4 for now, and we cover our need for frequency containment reserve for 100% and the reserve for automatic frequency restoration reserve for 70%. Totally, Ukrenergo acquired 788 megawatt of capacity to ensure the balancing of the power system. It was already said that the largest project in Ukraine is by DTEK with a capacity of 200 megawatts, and we will hear about it. On the whole, more than 50 companies concluded contracts with NPC Ukrenergo on the result of special auctions for providing auxiliary services. Also, what underlines the necessity of energy storages is that today the global daily storage volume is about 35 gigawatt hour, and it will rise up to 500 gigawatt hour by 2035. What we can see about some specific opportunities and challenges that each market segment offers us. If to analyze, we can see the day-ahead market characterizes with high transparency, flexibility, volatility, and it provides with fast payments and actually high competition. Intraday market is also flexible but less liquid and have higher level of uncertainty. Balancing market creates strict technical requirements and incomes may be unpredictable or even delayed, unfortunately. Ancillary service market also offers stable incomes but creates strict technical requirements and is less flexible. And unfortunately, or thanks God, I don't know, it is already formed as after the results of special auctions. Energy storage's development in Ukraine is still in its early stages. And the first energy storages entered the auxiliary and balancing market only October this year. Amid intensified attacks on energy infrastructure, loss of traditional balancing generation, growing capacity deficits, and shifts in market trends and structures. The total capacity currently offered by energy storage systems for providing automatic frequency restoration reserve services is 155 megawatt. the average share of energy storages in the total volume of automatic frequency restoration reserve services in October was 47% for upward and 26% for downward regulation. So, taking into account different conditions of operating in different market segments, we developed 3 financial models to evaluate efficiency of operating in these segments. I present to your attention the first model of energy storages operation in a balancing and ancillary services market, with the strategy of providing symmetrical reserve service and automatic frequency restoration reserve when it's needed. What result we can see? A model demonstrates actually stable income from capacity reserve payments, significant added value, and strong investment attractiveness. Nevertheless, the commercial strategy has its advantages and disadvantages. It may bring some risks, such as unpredictable unpredictability of balancing market trends. And we could see it on the previous slide. Also, because it's caused by facility destructions, and it also can, it's possible to face increasing competition over time. The next model is the model of the energy storages operation on the day-ahead market. And the strategy consists of purchasing electricity during times of surplus at low prices and selling it during times of electricity deficit at high prices. 8 scenarios in general were analyzed depending on the capacity, number of cycles, tariffing approaches, and ways of connecting to the grid. Okay, I will skip it. No, just if you want to, if there will be some questions, it's just details of calculations, and if somebody will be interested, I will certainly tell about it. You will be able to share the presentation? Yeah, sure, sure. In general, most of the alternatives demonstrate positive but modest return. Full tariffing actually drastically reduces profitability, especially for smaller projects. If to compare with one cycle scenario, arbitrage efficiency drops by 27–28%. Several words about tariffing for delta and full tariffing. So everything would be clear that today we have how it is working for now. Energy storages operators pay tariffs, for example, for transmitting and dispatching, or excuse me. Depending on the difference between between purchased energy and supplied, but for now several adjustments are considered by our regulator, and energy storages operators may face full tariffing. It means that they will pay tariffs for energy purchased and energy supplied. That's why we decided to include it in our model, because this scenario also could be. The last model is a combined financial model of working of energy storage operation in day-ahead market and balancing market. And this strategy consists of purchasing electricity on the day-ahead market during night hours at lower prices, then selling it during morning peak consumption hours at higher prices, charging on the balancing market by providing the automatic frequency restoration reserve for downward, and then selling electricity on the day-ahead market during evening peak consumption hours. 4 scenarios were analyzed, again, depending on capacity tariffing approaches and ways of connecting to the grid. And almost all the alternatives show strong performance and are marginally profitable. Tariffing for delta significantly improves returns compared to full tariffing again. Larger capacity delivers higher NPV and better resilience against tariff costs. Combined strategy is in general more profitable than arbitrage alone, but accurate market planning is crucial here. Development of energy storages in Ukraine faces major obstacles. Unfortunately, military risks, high capital costs, grid connection challenges, legislative gaps, technical organizational barriers. Energy storages operators may face risk of double tariffing, lack of market experience influence the development, administrative pricing restrictions, market debt, and certification complexity. Nevertheless, energy storage systems are not just a technological solution. They are a strategic instrument for ensuring energy security and resilience of Ukraine. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. I think that the numbers are really insightful, and thank you for showing us and sharing with us different modeling options. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions about the IRRs and assumptions. Maybe we can discuss it during the panel or after. But right now I'd like to give a floor to Dmitrij as a representative of IFC. Maybe you can tell more what you do as IFC in Ukraine and what's your experience. What is needed for a project to become bankable in Ukraine? Because this is one of the fancy questions right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Alina. Hello, everyone. My name is Dmitrij Semeniuk, Investment Officer at IFC. For those who may potentially miss the introduction of IFC made by Alina, so I'll repeat a couple of things. IFC is a private sector arm of the World Bank Group, the largest development institution in the world and the only truly global institution in the world. Ukraine has always been a priority country for us, and even more so since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine a couple of years ago. Since then, we have invested and mobilized over $2.7 billion it's only for private sector, of which IFC has invested 1.7 billion or more of own account. And we've been supporting different sectors, agriculture, technology, banking, infrastructure, including energy. In storage specifically, we've been engaged for a couple of years, first mainly through technical advisory and assistance. For example, we helped Ukrenergo model island operation mode, assuming in case Ukraine is disconnected from neighboring power systems. And the studies show how a 200 megawatt standalone BESS can support and provide the required flexibility to the grid. We then also engaged with reputable international institutes to see how strategically placing batteries of different sizes across Ukraine and neighboring countries can help providing stability to the grid in Ukraine and in Europe in case of further damage to the energy infrastructure, and also to increase energy flow. And most recently, we've been engaged with several private sector clients, such as Scatec, on helping review bankability of most recent auction documentation. In parallel, IBRD, which is the public sector arm of the World Bank Group, has recently signed a loan agreement with Ukrenergo, among others, to develop almost 200 megawatts storage project adjacent to their existing facilities. Overall, IFC is not new to storage investments. We've been doing it for quite some time now. We invested and mobilized over 1 billion worldwide into storage across very different countries, from Chile to Mongolia, with very different structures, with blended tariffs, standalone BESS, project finance, corporate finance, hybrid facilities where a PV has its own PPA, storage has its own capacity payments, for example, and with different degree of merchant exposure. So we are not new to storage, and we generally, as IFC, see how important it is to further develop storage because it helps integrate more renewables, as also Ruslana explained, and to help countries achieve their decarbonization goals. In Ukraine, currently, among other things that we're looking into energy sector, we're also looking into and investing in storage, because as also Ruslana mentioned, it's critical for Ukraine's energy security. So we're looking at the different business models and trying to apply the lessons learned internationally to what we can do in Ukraine. In terms of bankability, it's a good question, but also what we learned from our experiences is there is really no size fits all when it comes to battery storage financing and what's bankable, what's not. I would probably highlight 3 core pillars, and some of them are fairly basic and obvious, but what applies to storage more specifically is revenue certainty. Investors and lenders, they're looking for long-term revenue certainty. So long-term PPAs, long-term capacity payments, payments for ancillary services, they're really important for bankability. Of course, in practice, battery storage may have very different combinations of revenue streams, so arbitrage, balancing market, capacity payments, ancillary services, and we've seen different mixes and different combinations being equally bankable. It really depends on the user case. So overall, from revenue certainty perspective, I would say still today, in emerging markets, the more and the longer contracted revenues are, the stronger is the bankability case. The second point is technical reliability. And here we're essentially looking for assurances that from the technical point of view, the project and the counterparts will be able to deliver the performance over the estimated asset life. It is still relatively new technology in the world, and there is no 15 years track record to see how the technology is doing. So we're really banking more on reputable players in the market. So tier 1 manufacturers, warranties that cover degradation, efficiency, etc., fixed price EPC contracts, and credible EPC counterparts and O&M counterparts. And the third one is probably also more applicable to Ukraine, is the confidence in regulatory framework and counterparts. With lenders, when it comes to storage in particular, and given different revenue streams, I think market rules needs to be very predictable and clear. So rules for dispatching, charging, discharging, metering. Ruslana also showed a slide how full tariffing versus delta makes a big difference on IRR. So that's a key concern for Ukraine today as well. So these rules are key, and also the credit offerings of the off-taker, of course, especially if there is reliance of the off-taker for dispatch, etc. It's a key consideration for us, and also the credit strength from the sponsor. So I would highlight these 3 parts, but again, in our experience, having financed very different business cases for storage, there is no size fit all, but fundamentals are relatively the same. It's revenue certainty, it's technological reliability, and incredible counterparts and clear market rules. What we're looking into Ukraine right now is a mix between hybrid and standalone projects. I would say from IFC point of view, traditionally we have been more comfortable with financing hybrid solutions because there is a bit clearer structure in terms of how BESS can help PV systems, for example, and exploit market opportunities. Standalone, there is typically a higher reliance on capacity payments and longer term revenue certainty. But again, it can work. We also see more and more requests for us to consider taking full merchant exposure, including for BESS, and not just in Ukraine, but also in neighboring countries, for example, Romania. We see that market is converging toward finding a solution how BESS can work under merchant basis, but overall, it's not easy. I would say it really depends on the overall investment profile. So in fully deregulated markets, when the price signals are strong and one can predict with reasonable degree of certainty the arbitrage opportunities, I think this is possible. We have done it in Chile. We're looking at this in Romania. So with fully functioning markets, strong sponsors and pricing transparency, this is possible. I think, again, in Ukraine today with the pricing caps, etc., it's a bit more difficult. But given the strong needs, I think we'll want to look into that. I also mentioned that we recently signed a new guarantee agreement with the European Commission for 100 million that will exclusively support our initiatives in equity and mezzanine instruments. So potentially, hopefully, storage will be among those opportunities that we can support through these initiatives. I think especially in merchant storage, equity it might be quite attractive play for us. Maybe not so on the standalone asset opportunity, but if it's a diversified portfolio of several BESS projects, I think we can make a fairly strong case. Among other concerns in Ukraine that we're seeing today, I think overall, like in terms of key pillars, there are two. One is predictability of the rules, and second is the certainty of payment. So predictability of the rules overall is key. We as lenders, we typically like to see the standardized project for standardized contracts for storage projects as well, based on which we can do our assessment of the project cash flows and so on. For example, in Poland, in a country with dire need for additional storage because of the upcoming coal decommissioning, the investor interest for storage only picked up after government introduced 17-year capacity contracts, which cover 30 to 40% of expected project revenues. And now we finally saw some traction with regard that investors are actually ready to put equity. In Uzbekistan, where World Bank Group worked with the government to do the first competitive tender for storage, also no project was financed until government agreed to pay a 10-year availability payment guaranteed by the state. So overall, these regulatory gaps and changes in the legislation in Ukraine with the retroactive changes in the legislation eroded some of this confidence. And one of the ways to restore it would be to provide, at least for storage, long-term capacity revenues. Because as we also saw for the graphs, from the graphs, the 5-year ancillary contracts is a good start, but it's not enough even to reach the payback period. And from lenders' perspective, it would be difficult to provide long-term financing that goes beyond the 5-year contract period. So that's one of the obstacles that we currently see when it comes to financing storage projects in Ukraine.
Thank you so much. That looks like a lot of obstacles, to be honest. And would be curious to hear a view from Bernt as an experienced developer in Ukraine. How do you think it's realistic to have bankable projects right now, considering what we've heard from IFC and your experience right now in Ukrainian market?
Yes, thank you, Alina. And let me say 2 words about who we are. So Fenix Repower came to Ukraine in 2019. We were consultants. We were invited to manage the construction of the Sviderska wind power plant, which we did, and we started constructing also for Energy the Sofia 800 megawatts, which was then stopped just before the full-scale invasion. And by that time, we had managed to establish ourselves in Kiev, and we have kept our office open, gone from 8 to 7 because one of ours is in the war, luckily still in good condition. This I asked for the opportunity to say 2 words about the results of a piece of work we did, sponsored by NORAD. NORAD is the Norwegian, shall I say, organization that works with many countries. This is the section that is called the Jansen Fund, and the Jansen Fund is focused on Ukraine. This is a piece of paper, I was going to say. We will publish these slides. We will also publish the report on our homepage later this month. And this topic is co-location of BESS and wind. And we wondered, why can we not make the IRR go up when we add batteries to our wind projects? And simple analysis brought the IRR down. So we took a more complex approach, and that's why we asked for funding help. So these are 2 complicated slides. The first one tells what we modeled. And what we have done compared to is that we have excluded all of these difficult ones, and we have taken the 3 simple ones. So you can see here what we have included. You can see, for instance, on the dam we have included, but on the intraday market, which is not really working so much in Ukraine, we have included very little benefit from it. We have not tried to exclude the balance responsible party, so that cost is still in there. But we have taken arbitrage, and of course, in the balancing, we have put in the benefit of compensating for our over imbalances and under imbalances the day after. And just to draw a small parallel to Norway, where we also work, is that in Norway now and in northern Sweden, we see now wind projects in huge trouble because the power prices are so low, they can't even pay for their own imbalances. So we see the first project in Norway that's operating today, already looking at installing batteries. And I won't say the numbers because that comes later, and it's the same as we have found here. See, I'm switching myself. This is great. Here is what we haven't taken into account. And you had modeled all of this. We found it difficult to put certainty against any of this. And that is one of the reasons for us not participating in the auction last year. And second reason was we didn't think we could build it fast enough, to be honest. But we have simplified this a lot. And of course, no benefit from any of this is in our numbers. Thank you. This is the spread from last year, or from this year up to now, really. And you can see that towards the end now, we have had a much bigger spread on the prices, which of course helps any of these calculations. We have not taken account of this big spread period. We have just utilized the more conservative earlier history. And what we have also utilized is data from people that has helped us. We have utilized a lot of data from Arise, who owns 70% of Fenix Repower. But Girish has also been very kind to help us with some real production data in Ukraine, which has been very, very helpful. So thank you to Girish. You can see that if we had taken account of the last segment there, which is the big spread, we add maybe 5 to 7% on the IRR, just to give you a feel for how much it matters when the spread is so large. This is our assumption base, and nothing spectacular here, but we are working with a 100 megawatt wind farm. That's kind of the idea. That's underneath, and we are trying to find out how can we do it smartly, how big should it be, how should we operate it. And you can see here we have manually created a scheme down on the right-hand side for how we will run the battery. There is no way I can explain all of this properly because our Stanislav Moderator is the expert, and he has done it together with Repower, who's the brains behind this, not me. Here you see a curve showing how we are using the battery, where we are trying to, we have taken account of the fact that we can import from the grid. We have not taken account for selling power onto the grid where it's above our capacity. So the grid connection has been sized for the wind power plant, and we have not tried to oversize it to be able to capture these peaks. That we can look at it in a small sensitivity later. But this is what it ends up looking like. And this is the result. I'm trying to be quick here so nobody starts asking difficult questions. You can see here that we have played with just doing imbalances. Can I make a light there? Oh, yes. We can do only imbalances, and here you can see IRRs. And what are these numbers? This is the effect of the battery onto the grid. And we have a 100 megawatt wind farm. So they basically you say 10% effect and then 2 hours. So 20 megawatt hours is behind 10 megawatt effect. So then you understand the technical concept. And then you see, then we do only arbitrage. First we do only imbalances, then we do only arbitrage. And you can see just on arbitrage alone, we can sort of make it have a sensible life on IRR. So this is an IRR that is without any form of leverage of loans or anything. It's just simple project IRR. And we bought a new set of forecasts from May that we then put together with the work from EUEA Power, or they put together for us. Then we hit the sweet spot combination, which was one cycle arbitrage and imbalances, which gives us this. And you can see that it starts making a lot of sense to have a bit of battery next to your wind power. And all of those complicated things, all the problems that we saw earlier, we have not taken account of. So that will purely be cream on the cake if you can get something from it. And then you see we played with a bit more 2 cycles. It brings us down, and of course, because we are consuming the battery faster, and we are having to augment it earlier. So this is the main outcome. Here's a couple of sensitivities. So you can see that if we were going to, so the tariff we have assumed is the difference tariff that was explained. Yeah. So we are drawing 10 megawatts from the grid, and we are able to reproduce 8 megawatts, and we only pay tariff for the 2. And that's the system we have utilized. But you can see, if we take a double tariff both ways, like we have in Norway, we only, well, I'm not able to make the, oops, the red light again. Here it is. There it is. We only pull it down by 0.6%, and you had, I think, several percentage points down when you had the full tariffing, I seem to remember from your numbers, yeah? I think it is because we have excluded so many of the other traffics that you had included in the base. So I was also a bit surprised how little negative impact the double tariffing has. We can also see that if we didn't allow ourselves to import from the grid onto the battery, which wasn't allowed in Ukraine up to a year ago already, even I think, then we would have dropped the IRR by 2%. And then if you start looking at utilizing, you remember from my first slide where we saw the big price difference towards the end of this year, if you start utilizing those type of things, then you start really looking at higher IRRs, significantly higher IRRs. And of course, people speculate that that is probably more realistic for the future than the less spreads that you can see down in these numbers. So we feel there is a very strong case for, I can also show you the last slide. This talks about the fact that there's a certain number of days in the year where we are simply would have benefited from having more grid capacity. So we are losing this piece here when we don't have more grid capacity. And as we all know, grid capacity costs a lot of money in some cases, and some cases not maybe. And it should definitely, we have decided to think seriously about this element now that we are looking at adding BESS to our projects. And I guess for us it feels a bit natural as an explanation. We see the Norwegian project that I referred to, 224 megawatt effect from this wind power plant, and they added 11 megawatt effect battery to a 22 megawatt hours. So we saw it in an application they made this summer, and that's the first one in Norway, and I think it matches extremely well with these numbers we see here. And of course, Norway also has seen a huge growth in balancing costs compared to just 3 years ago, for totally different set of reasons than in Ukraine, but still the point is the same. So that is kind of the story I wanted to share, and this is the piece of work we felt. Now we've done some real thorough work on it, and it's not just skimping along the tops. And what we are now working on, well, EUEA is working on, is to help us with things that could have improved it even further in terms of legislation. So, and you will see that we will probably route it into EUEA. I expect that's the way it will be done. And that concludes my little talk. Thank you.
Really impressive, honestly. All the numbers, it's really great to see that, and it's interesting to compare to the experience of DTEK. Marco, you've already have built 200 megawatts. What's your experience? Can you confirm the numbers? Any secret insights are more than welcomed.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And disclaimer, I will not share any more numbers and tables, and I'll not comment on those seen. But so for everybody, I'll spare you probably the introduction on DTEK. Just very briefly, we're a large integrated utility in Ukraine, basically across from thermal generation, coal mining, up to trading and retail. We basically do everything that's available in the energy sector, maybe except nuclear, which is in state hands, obviously, and hydropower. So as you rightly said, we just commissioned 200 megawatts of battery storage facilities across several locations in the greater Kiev region and in Dnipropetrovsk, together with Fluence, who was a big part in getting this done. And maybe this is getting into the challenges and what we faced and learned from the project. I can share maybe a bit with the audience. But before that, how we got there. So in 2021, I believe, we commissioned, I think, the first utility scale battery in Ukraine, 1 megawatt, not with Fluence, lesson learned, in Zaporizhia, next to our thermal power plant there, that was then unfortunately lost during the full-scale invasion. But we were basically thinking about battery storage already since then, and for a very simple reason. DTEK owns the single largest fleet of thermal power plants in Ukraine. And that means that if you look at the generation mix in Ukraine, you see that baseload is provided by nuclear. And then you have an increasing capacity of renewables that we don't have a minor share in building out. And if you look at that composition, you understand that thermal power plants are basically what keeps the grid balanced. And our understanding of that and the coal phase out that Ukraine and signed up for, and DTEK basically supports and is still aligned with, made us understand that we needed to understand battery technology from early on. And I think this understanding since 2021 and this little 1 megawatt battery toy that we built helped us to understand the asset class and be a bit ahead of the curve. So when Ukrenergo really at astonishing speed was able to design and implement these auctions, and I think this is sometimes underappreciated in what kind of circumstances our regulator basically does their day-to-day job and still manages to properly incentivize deployment of different technologies in Ukraine, certainly faster than in Germany, I would assume. It's just it's very, very astonishing what you're doing. So when that first auction, well, we had the FCR auction in the beginning that we decided to sit out because we anticipated that it was going to be very low prices. We focused on the first AFR auction and were able to secure 140 megawatts, I think, of capacity. Again, I think the fact that we had looked at batteries for a while, the fact that we were investing in batteries outside of Ukraine already in Poland and in other jurisdictions, helped us to be within this first wave of batteries. Because what we then saw, and this is maybe the only thing I will share about numbers and returns, is I'm not sure how some of the bidders in later auction rounds make their economics work. So the first auction, and I think this is actually public, we cleared relatively high to the cap. If you look at the clearing prices in the second, in brackets, and third auction in particular, we ran our models up and down and left and right, and we didn't see how to make those IRRs work, which is in a certain sense good because it means that there's interest and capital in Ukraine that wants to invest in batteries. On the other hand, and I'm sure Julian will provide his view on this, but it means that either people are discounting on technology, and that raises a huge question about grid stability and what type of technology do you want in the Ukrainian grid, and is this critical infrastructure and how should it be protected? And on the other hand, I think it raises question about financing and bankability and how these projects are actually banked. And I think here most of it was already said. We were able to secure local bank financing for it because I think for any international bank to come in within this time frame would have been just would have been a stretch. We had just financed Artiligulska wind farm with international commercial banks, and I think that it was mentioned before. I think it was more than 2 years that it took us to get that done. So, given the very tough time frame put by Ukrenergo, we basically decided to go with local financing in hryvnia. On the challenges during the development, and I think Fluence as well as our development team, they're still recovering from it. They worked in the end, I think, around the clock to get to this timeline on 6 different locations, doing remote commissioning, having to bring 690 odd containers into Ukraine through different landways. I remember at some point we were bringing in some of the cabling basically by car from Poland because that was the only way we would be there on time for commissioning. And I think the main lesson learned here is that if you are ahead of the curve in Ukraine regarding any technology, you'll be quite able to secure good and attractive projects, even during the current conditions. And then maybe one last point, which is just about the outlook and some of the regulatory changes that would improve potentially the current environment. But then again, I think that when you're assembling a plane while it's flying, it's going to be a bit complicated. So we just trust that the process will catch up with, or the regulation will catch up with the process and with reality over time. But it's basically getting closer to standards such as that would allow integration with Picasso, smaller market intervals that allow you to trade more frequently. And then I think we will see how batteries move from being really kind of a grid resilience type of asset still in Ukraine towards an asset that will allow to execute asset-backed trading strategies, do more in arbitrage and in everything that was already mentioned in terms of payment discipline, balancing market, etc. Will materialize and will allow this to be an asset class. And then I think that one last point, I'm not sure if it was mentioned this, but I think what we do need, because you mentioned it regarding Poland, is technology agnostic capacity markets with long-term contracts, because that is really what will drive the build out of technologies that allow then to create a more resilient grid, given the state that we're currently in. I mean, we're being shelled, I think, almost every day currently on our thermal power plants. And this is also technology that, honestly, in 2025, 26, no one is really going to continue to build out, let's say, coal-fired power plants. So we need to, and Ukraine has an opportunity, unfortunately, so to do this forcibly. And I think this is one of the big opportunities that we see in the market going forward.
Thank you, Marko. You're truly doing history right now, and there is a lot to learn from what you do. I know that we're running out of time, but we still need to hear this recovering process from Julian. And honestly, I still cannot apprehend how much you have done so quickly. So if you can share your experience in Ukraine and overall in the world, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for the kind words, Marko. Fluence, maybe just very briefly, because unlike DTEK, not everyone knows who we are. We are one of the largest suppliers of battery energy storage systems, solutions, software, and services. We've now deployed or are currently deploying more than 40 gigawatt hours. We're listed on New York Stock Exchange. we have a bit of a history, in that we were founded as a joint venture between Siemens and AES. So we have this very kind of German-American heritage and belief. We do a lot of software development here in Germany, out of Erlangen. And we took a very strategic and conscious decision to supply into Ukraine. And many suppliers did not do that. They did not think about how to structure a way to deliver and commission and then operate storage assets in Ukraine with good partners. And for us, that was a really key strategic decision taken at the very top to do that. So we've now deployed in total 7 projects, 500 megawatt hours in Ukraine, 6 of those with our partners at DTEK. And I think from my side, two things before I share the experience. It's actually personally one of the proudest moments I had was being in Kiev. Was about mid-September, opening one of our sites, and it was just incredible to see what has been done in record time, and that makes such a strong impact in supporting energy security in Ukraine. And that is just incredible, because the technology class that we're talking about has so much potential and capability that is underutilized. But in the severe conditions and circumstances the Ukrainian energy system finds itself, actually it's where it excels and where it delivers value beyond what we see in any other energy system. And to your point earlier, actually we've been operating storage assets for 17 years. So there is there's one supplier that has a long-term track record and can deliver that. So coming to the specific challenges here in Ukraine, as I mentioned, very unique projects. They were delivered in record time. So it took us about 6 months from signing the contract to going through the commissioning and market testing of these assets. To compare that, in Germany, most projects would probably take, if they're good, about 15, 16 months. So you can think about the impact that has, not just on the supply chain, but then on the commissioning and installation locally. We built a unique structure together with our partners, whereby we trained, it was a total, I think, 20 Ukrainian engineers in our service center in Erlangen and on sites in Germany and Finland, so that they could commission those projects in Ukraine. It's a really critical, I think, knowledge transfer into the market to continue building towards that target that Ruslana, you showed, the 1.5 gigawatt, because we need that capability, we need that knowledge within Ukraine to keep building that out. And we then also developed a remote commissioning model whereby we supported the team that was working on site to bring those projects online as fast as possible. So I think that's a unique nature of the project. But what can we learn, or what do we take away? I think one, the strength of partnership, not just in the Ukrainian context, but across the world. When you have very strong partnerships from a technology supplier side, but also from a developer side, and you work through how to be faster, more effective, and find solutions, as you said, as you kind of flying the plane, that's how, let's say, innovation and greatness happens. And I think these projects are a really good example for that. I also think what's very clear is just the speed at which DTEK in this case was willing to build these assets and invested in them and put the workforce behind it. And I think that's very unique, that within the auction, but then also within the market, we've created circumstances that allow assets to be deployed and connected at such speed. However, I think there's also a few things that we need to improve and still think about. You mentioned actually earlier, storage is not a technology class, it's a strategic investment. I think it needs to be treated as such within the Ukrainian context. Right now we're seeing a race to the bottom, tier 2 technology being deployed. Storage is critical infrastructure. It's not a solar panel. It doesn't just generate a bit of electricity. It is there to provide grid stability. But right now we're deploying software and controls that, how do I best say this, can be associated to foreign entities of concern, right? So we're building critical grid infrastructure in Ukraine that has control software in it that could potentially be accessed by, I would say, not necessarily friendly countries. So that's a really big consideration, I think, for Ukrenergo and for policymakers. It's good to create competition in an auction, but are you building sustainable technology that is going to become critical grid infrastructure once you hit 1.5 gigawatt of storage assets? And I think the other element, kind of coming more to the investor side, is just allowing full market access, allowing revenue stacking to really function well. It's great to see government-backed auction, kind of the IFC perspective, but we also see where markets function well, investors are very willing to put money into even merchant business cases. And I actually think one thing that I take away from all my engagements now in Ukraine is some very hungry investors that put money behind storage, not just in Ukraine, but now looking elsewhere in Europe, because they're willing to take a higher risk, higher reward investment strategy. And I think that is great for the industry as a whole. So that's kind of where I would leave it, because it's such a critical and unique project. There's more to come. We continue to invest in Ukraine. Our CEO is very engaged both in the US and in Europe to keep driving that. And we're going to continue deploying that, continue upskilling and bringing our partners alongside with us, because we believe fundamentally storage is mission critical, and energy security is security. And storage forms one of the key backbones of that going forward.
Super. Thank you so much. Really impressive everything you do, and we will keep watching what you're doing. Hopefully, working together, business, IFIs, government, Ukrenergo. Yeah. So I know we run out of time, so I guess all the questions will be afterwards during the dinner or after party. So I'm just giving the floor now to the next panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, colleagues.